Let's look at section 2.1, reviewing equations notes. Today we're going to start with just reviewing one-step and two-step equations before we start working some more difficult equations. So let's look at one-step equations first. The first thing you need to remember is that you use inverse operations, and inverse means opposite. So the inverse of addition is subtraction. The inverse of subtraction is addition. The inverse of multiplication is division. And the inverse of division is multiplication. So let's look at an example. The first example is done for us and it has steps written next to it. So x plus 4 equals 12. Step 1, we're going to isolate the variable. So let's just put a circle around our variable. Step 2, we're going to apply the inverse of positive 4 or plus 4 to both sides. So the inverse of plus 4 is minus 4. So we have a positive 4, we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. Step 3, we'll solve and we get x equals 8. Let's take a look at the next one. Let's circle our variable that we need to isolate. X minus 5 equals 10. We have a minus 5, so the opposite of subtracting 5 is adding 5. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. And then x equals 10 plus 5, x equals 15. Let's look at the next one. Let's read it correctly. 3 times x equals 18. Let's circle our variable that we need to isolate. To apply the inverse of 3 times x, we're going to divide both sides by 3. When you divide by 3, these two cancel out, and x equals 18 divided by 3, x equals 6. On the next one, we have x divided by 4 equals 8. We'll circle the variable that we're going to isolate, and we'll perform the inverse operation. So if we're dividing by 4, we're going to multiply by 4. And we'll multiply both sides by 4. That means these two will cancel out, and x equals 32. Hopefully you remember all of this from the beginning of the year, but I just wanted to do a quick review to get us back into solving equations. Let's take a look at the back side of your notes. On the back side, there are 4 problems for you to do. Now these are a little bit more difficult than the ones we did on the front because they do include some negative numbers. So keep in mind your rules for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing negative numbers. Go ahead and work problems 1 through 4 on your paper and bring those back to class tomorrow and we'll go through them. Now that you've finished working those problems above, let's look at solving two-step equations. Now we have not formally learned how to solve two-step equations, but while working on our geometry unit over the last couple of months, we solve two-step equations all the time. And I think this will look familiar to you after we get started. So with the first one, 3x minus 4 equals 41, it says step 1, isolate the variable and its coefficient. So the first thing we want to do is isolate 3x, and to do that we have a minus 4 that we need to get rid of. So we need to perform the inverse operation of minus 4 to both sides. The inverse operation of minus 4 is plus 4. So let's add 4 to both sides. That means that these two are going to cancel out, and we get 3x equals 41 plus 4, 3x equals 45. Step 3 says isolate the variable and its coefficient. Well, this time we are trying to get x by itself. In order to do that, we need to perform the inverse operation of multiplying 3 to both sides by dividing 3 by both sides. Because when we multiplied 3 by x, we now need to divide both sides by 3 because that's the inverse of multiplication. When you do that, these two are canceling. 45 divided by 3 is 15. Let's look at the second example. X divided by 5 minus 11 equals 10. Let's circle what we're going to isolate first. Now we have minus 11, so we have to do the opposite, or the inverse. So we're going to add 11 to both sides. That leaves us, these two canceling, x divided by 5 equals 21, because 10 plus 11 is 21. Now let's circle our variable again. And this time we have x divided by 5 equals 21, so we do the opposite of division and we multiply both sides by 5. We do that, these two cancel, and we get x equals 105. Hopefully you recall working on problems similar to this during our geometry unit, especially the first example for two-step equations. So now that you have finished your notes for reviewing, bring those back to class tomorrow, and we're going to start working on some different equations and solving equations, just reviewing over the next couple of days before we start working on some more difficult equations.